What's up, music makers? It's Luke from Sojourner Tracks. If you write in Logic as well as produce or mix, then you know that the writing process can get really messy. You're trying to get ideas out quickly. You're throwing on effects, you're taking effects off. You're just trying to get your ideas out as fast as possible. I understand that. I use Logic in the same way, but when you get to the mixing process, things are hard to find. It's very cluttered and unorganized, and you end up spending a lot more time than you need to. So today I want to show you some organizational tools to help you develop a process, something that you can do every time you're in a session to keep things where they're supposed to be, that everything has its place, that it is easy to find and use, and it's just going to expand your workflow. You're going to get more done, and you're not going to get frustrated by all of the inconsistencies in your project. Today we're looking at a project by my friend Jake Albers. He goes by the name The Acrobats. You can check him out in the SoundCloud link in the description below. If you wouldn't mind, please hit that subscribe button. Let's check it out. Okay, so this is the session. As you can see, quite a bit going on here. A lot of different audio clips and quite a few tracks as well. But everything's kind of one color. Some of these track titles are not something that are necessarily going to be really helpful to you as you move through your session, being able to see things quickly and identify them. Which is just what happens as you're writing. You don't necessarily have time or know exactly how a part's going to function to label it correctly, so that's something to look at. But let's just quickly look at some housekeeping things that I would do first to help get the session operating in the best way possible. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go up here to Logic, Preferences, Audio. And you can see this is set to 32 samples, the buffer size. And I want to change this to 1024 because if you had it set lower for recording, now that we're doing some mixing, this is going to help your system handle the load of all the plugins that you're going to be adding. That's just a computer performance kind of thing. The second thing I would do is up here under drag, it's set to no overlap. I would change this to crossfade. And all that means is that anywhere I have two audio pieces, audio regions that are overlapped, it's going to automatically add a fade, which is really helpful. Thirdly, customize your control bar. Now this is entirely up to you, how you work, what you want to see while you're working, but if you right click up here in the transport window and go to customize control bar and display, you're going to see all of these options for things that you can have up here. And if you change this to custom, for example, I don't necessarily need to see locators right now. I don't need to see MIDI activity. I do want to see the CPU and hard drive load that I'm adding to the computer. So just look through these, think about the kind of things that you're going to be working with, what you want to see, and that can be really helpful to have those visual aids up here, or to remove things that you don't need to see, the distractions that you don't need. I'm all about that as well. Next, we have Waveform Zoom, and that is over here next to the drag option. All this does is it just zooms the audio within the region. So it doesn't actually change anything about the audio, but this way from a distance we can actually see a little bit better what is going on in the actual waveform without doing anything with the zoom. So like I said, it doesn't change the audio at all. It's just a zoom tool. I like to have that up, as well as over here in the track view, I like to have zoom focus track. So now whatever track I have selected, it's going to be larger, just easier to see, easier to work on, and then with that waveform zoom I can see where all the transient spikes are and all of that good stuff. Very helpful visual stuff. The last housekeeping tip that I have for you is up here you click on this browser tab, it's going to bring up all of the files that are in this session. If you go to Edit and select Unused, I'll give it a minute here. These are, everything in blue is a file that either was deleted, a take that wasn't used. None of this is actually out here in the session window. So this is just a lot of baggage, especially if you're going to be sharing your session, uploading it to Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever. This is a lot of extra data that doesn't need to be here. So go back up to Edit, hit Delete, and now you're left with only the pieces that you really need. So obviously make sure that you're not going to go back and try and resurrect some old takes or something. But once you're all set with everything out here, you don't need any of that stuff to be hanging around, taking up space, making your projects, gigabytes and gigabytes worth of data. Next, we're going to move on to some organizational things. So one thing that I would do is, this is kind of already done in this session for the most part, but just making sure that your instruments are grouped so that all of the vocals are together, all the guitars are together. Down here, you can see if we click and then hold Shift and click, we can select multiple tracks. These two synths are in the middle of guitar tracks, which is unnecessary. And then along with that, just think about your track order. So I think it's a good idea to have the track order be the same or as close to the same every time, so that you know exactly where things are when you're looking for them. So for example, I would put my drum tracks all the way on the top, followed by the bass guitars. So click and then hold Shift. We can select all of these at once and put these underneath the bass or the drums. And then vocals, I like to put vocals last. So I move those all the way to the bottom. And so now I have drums, bass, guitars, synths, vocals. And I do that the same way every single time, and that way I always know where that stuff is within a session. It can be in whatever order you want it to be, but as long as it's the same every time, it's really going to help you work faster. The next thing I do is color the tracks. Now, if you go to any track, you click on the track, it's going to select all of the regions. And if you come up here then to this toolbar, all the way on the right is your color palette. I always put my drums in red, and I always put my bass in yellow. And so if you shift click the track headings, it selects all of the regions within all of those tracks as well. So there are my basses in yellow. I like to do vocals in like a hot pink. And then take it one step further. If you go up here to functions, and you can go to color track by region color. And what that's going to do is it's going to take whatever color your region is and add it over here to the track header. So if we do, let's do Command A to select all. You can see now my drums are red, the track is red, bass is yellow, track is yellow. Now, these are just things that, they might seem kind of insignificant, but when you're working and you can say, oh, pink, it's a vocal, or where are my, synths, the green ones, it's the only green thing out there. So it can be really helpful as you're navigating, especially when you got a large track count. It can be you can get lost in it really easily. Just completely avoid that frustration. Color things, and then also to go along with that is labeling. So Heavy Kit by Kyle, you know, that I know that's a drum kit, but for me anyway, I like to just label it drums. And then I will go through all of these guitar tracks, and I'm going to make sure that they actually represent what's actually happening there, making sure that they're all labeled. Like we've got these two here that aren't labeled at all, so I would just come in here. This is a guitar left, and then a nice tip for you is while you're in that window, if you hit tab, moves down to the next title, and we could put guitar right. So I would go through all the guitars and maybe just label them in a way that made more sense to me. Obviously, if you're the one working in this project and that's how you labeled them, then maybe that makes sense to you already. For something like this where it says Airways and Everlasting, these two synth pads, that means absolutely nothing to me. So I'm going to listen to them. So right off the bat, I know that's a synth lead. I don't need to know the name of the instrument. I need to know that that's a lead. So that's going to help me when I need to find a synth lead part, or this. Let's listen to this next part. And that would be more of a pad. So a synth pad makes a little bit more sense in this context than just having the name of the instrument. And then I would do the same for the vocals. You know, call this lead vocal chorus. I like to just shorten it, lead vocal chorus, and lead vocal chorus, etc., etc. Next, you can see most of these tracks already have an icon here. I love this addition to Logic. You can really quickly tell what kind of instrument you're looking at. So, for example, all these guitar tracks that don't have an icon yet, I would select all of those. And if you right-click where the icon should be, I believe he plays a Les Paul style guitar, so I could just do all of them at once. It's just a neater look, and again, visually, it just makes sense. It might seem insignificant again, but for visual people especially, those kind of things really connect a session to whoever's working in it. The final organizational thing that I would do is up here under the Global Tracks button, you can add markers. And if you hit this plus sign, it will add a marker wherever the playhead is. So just be aware of that. But a marker pops up. If you double click on the title, we call this intro, for example. And say this one, let's say that's our verse 1. And then if we added another one here, we can call this chorus 1. No, I haven't listened that far yet to know actually where they are, but you get the idea. And then if you go up here to your toolbar again and bring up your colors, you can color the markers as well. And so then when you get out of this Global Tracks button, you have these nice, neat markers here. Great visual symbols of where you are in the song. If you need to move quickly to chorus 2 or breakdown, whatever, just visually very helpful. So now I'm going to move on to some consolidation things, making sure that we don't have a higher track count than is necessary. If you need 100 tracks, by all means have 100 tracks, but sometimes I don't know if you've done this, but especially in the writing process, you might be controlling volume or specific effects by chopping up your audio and just moving it onto separate tracks. And I've done that when I was first using Logic. It happens in this song quite a bit, where it's just kind of on the fly mixing. So you chop up your audio, move it to a different track, and you can see, for example, on these 3 bass tracks, got wildly different volume settings. So he's just controlling the volume across different tracks. And while that's fine, and I understand why, when we get to mixing, it would be better to have a single bass track where I don't have to try and apply the same compression and EQ settings across 3 tracks as opposed to just 1. So you can see this bass track here is actually recorded through a different amp. So that's a very intentional move that we want to keep separate. But for these other 3 that are just spread across 3 tracks for the reason of controlling volume, I'm going to actually move these onto 1 track. Just make sure you keep everything, don't move it left or right as you're doing that. But now I have a single track instead of 3 that is going to, it's just going to make things a lot easier. So I'm not fighting, trying to make everything sound cohesive across different tracks, especially with bass, really important. But I will do this with some of the guitars as well, trying to pare things down to more continuous rhythm guitar tracks if they're all the same thing. The next thing that I would do is clean up some of this audio as well. And you can, I'm going to do a video on this all on its own, but just making sure that the transients aren't getting cut off. So you can see this is cut a little bit too close. I want to extend that out, and then if you hold Shift and Control and click and drag, you can add a fade in there. So making sure that this fade is nice, and might want to add a little overlap here, get a crossfade going in there. There's a lot more to it that I won't get into right now, but just making sure that when you have things cut off like this, you get a fade added to the end, the beginning and end of every track. Just a good idea to have a fade, but then also where audio tracks are meeting, you want to get fades in here. And also just making sure that you're not cutting off the beginning of a section. So like I said, if you're cutting off that initial beat, this audio is not going to be, no audio is played perfectly. So if you're cutting everything by the grid, you're probably losing some information. So you need to get in there and be a little bit more exact with the final audio editing and the cleanup. The last thing that I would do to consolidate these tracks is up here on this drummer region. And this is specific to drummer, but I think it's really important. If you use drummer, which I do quite a bit, is that I would convert this to a MIDI region. So now it's MIDI, and then if you hit Command J, it's now a continuous audio file, with the added bonus of if you need to tweak a drum fill, these hits are all movable now, which I think is just really helpful. You get into a session and it's like, that drum fill doesn't exactly match up quite the way that I thought it would. Instead of having to try and tweak a whole new part, you just move whatever hits you need to. I will say you do need to do it in that order. You definitely need to convert it to MIDI and then join it. If you join the regions before you do that, Logic Drummer, the algorithm whatever will take over, and all of your individual region edits will be mashed into one. So you'll end up with something that is not even close to what you started with. So convert to MIDI and then join. Hopefully this gets you started developing your own process, something repeatable in every session, so that things are where you expect them to be. They're easy to find and use. I hope that you're able to implement some of this stuff. Is there anything that I missed? What are the organizational tools that you are using that I didn't explain here? I'd love to hear in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, hit the like, and I will see you in the next video.